For my 30th birthday, my family secretly flew to Tahiti. Without me, I found out about it on Facebook. When I saw a post saying, "A wonderful day for a wonderful family," I wrote, "Why?" My dad replied, "We didn't want to waste our time on a clown." I smiled and replied, "Surprise waiting for you." That same day, I made a decision. 2 weeks later, my sister was screaming, mom was crying, dad begged me, we're family. I never thought my 30th birthday would be the day everything changed. I'm Jake, and I've spent most of my life being the family disappointment, at least according to my parents and my golden child sister Emma. She's 2 years younger than me, but you'd think she was the older sibling from how our parents treated us growing up. Emma was always the star. Straight A's, captain of the debate team, homecoming queen, full scholarship to Princeton. Meanwhile, I was the kid who preferred working with my hands, taking apart electronics just to see how they worked, and dreaming of starting my own tech repair business someday. My parents saw this as a lack of ambition. They never understood that I wasn't lazy or unmotivated. I just had different interests. The contrast between us was apparent from elementary school. I remember when we were both in a school science fair. I was in 5th grade, Emma in 3rd. I'd spent weeks building a working robot that could navigate obstacles using sensors I'd salvaged from old electronics. Emma made a volcano that erupted with baking soda and vinegar. Guess whose project got photographed for the local newspaper? Guess whose parents bragged about to everyone they met for months afterward? When I won 2nd place in the regional robotics competition in middle school, my parents attended but spent most of the time on their phones. When Emma won a local spelling bee that same year, they threw her a celebration dinner and invited all our relatives. The message was clear from an early age. Emma's achievements mattered. Mine were just Jake doing his weird little tech things again. The favoritism started early and only got worse as we got older. When Emma wanted piano lessons at age 7, they bought her a baby grand piano that cost more than most people's cars. When I asked for a computer programming class at age 9, they told me it was a waste of money and that I should focus on real subjects like math and English. Emma got a new BMW for her 16th birthday. I got a lecture about how I needed to earn my own money if I wanted transportation, and ended up riding my bike to my part-time job at the local Radio Shack. High school was particularly brutal for the comparison game. Emma was homecoming queen, valedictorian, and accepted to Princeton with a full scholarship. I was captain of the robotics team, had a solid B+ average, and was accepted to the state university with a partial scholarship. You'd think my parents would be proud of both of us, but instead, every conversation somehow became about how I needed to be more like Emma. I remember the night Emma got her acceptance letter to Princeton. My parents cried happy tears, called all our relatives, and immediately started planning a celebration dinner at the most expensive restaurant in town. They invited my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. It was like Emma had won the Nobel Prize. 2 weeks later, I got my acceptance letter to state with a scholarship for academic achievement and my leadership in the robotics program. I was thrilled. State had an excellent engineering program, and the scholarship would cover most of my tuition. When I showed my parents, my mother said, "That's nice, dear," and my father asked if I'd considered community college instead to save money. The celebration dinner they threw for me was pizza from the local place, just our immediate family, and halfway through the meal, the conversation turned to Emma's upcoming freshman orientation at Princeton. Even my own achievement celebration became about Emma. The message was clear. Emma was worth investing in, celebrating, and bragging about. I wasn't. After high school, Emma went off to Princeton while I attended State University and worked part-time at a local electronics store. My parents made it clear they were disappointed I wasn't following in Emma's footsteps. They'd constantly ask why I couldn't be more like my sister, why I didn't have bigger dreams, why I was content with such a small life. Every phone call home became an interrogation disguised as concern. How are your grades? Are you still working at that electronics store? Have you thought about transferring to a better school? Meanwhile, Emma's calls home were celebrations. She'd talk about her internships at prestigious firms, her networking events, her professors who were connecting her with Fortune 500 companies. I remember one particularly painful Thanksgiving during my junior year. The extended family was there, and my parents spent an hour detailing Emma's latest achievements. Her summer internship at Goldman Sachs, her role as president of the business club, her early acceptance to Harvard's MBA program. When someone finally asked how I was doing, my father said, "Oh, Jake's doing his computer thing at State. He seems happy enough. His computer thing." Like I was playing video games instead of earning a degree in electrical engineering with a focus on computer systems. The thing is, I wasn't content with a small life. I had big dreams. They just looked different from what my parents envisioned. While Emma was studying business theory and preparing for her corporate career, I was learning everything I could about emerging technologies, working on real projects for real companies, and developing skills that would eventually prove incredibly valuable. But my parents couldn't see past their narrow definition of success. During my senior year, while working on my capstone project, I developed a revolutionary data encryption system that caught the attention of several major tech companies. I had job offers waiting before I even graduated. But when I told my parents about it, their response was, "That's nice, honey. Did you know Emma's starting salary is going to be six figures?" After graduating from State University, I started my own computer consulting business out of a small rented office space. It was rough at first, but I was passionate about it. I loved helping businesses solve their complex technology problems, developing custom software solutions, and staying on the cutting edge of cybersecurity trends. My parents, however, saw it as confirmation that I was settling for mediocrity instead of getting a real job with a major corporation. The first 2 years were particularly challenging. I was competing against established firms with decades of experience and teams of engineers. But I had something they didn't. I was willing to work around the clock to solve problems that seemed impossible, and I genuinely cared about understanding each client's unique needs rather than just selling them standardized solutions. My breakthrough came when a mid-sized manufacturing company's entire computer network was compromised by a sophisticated cyber attack. Their regular IT company threw up their hands and said the data was unrecoverable. The attack had encrypted everything, and the hackers were demanding a ransom of $200,000. Instead of paying, the company's CEO decided to give me a chance. I spent 72 hours straight in their offices, analyzing the attack vectors, reverse engineering the encryption, and ultimately developing a solution that not only recovered all their data, but also strengthened their security to prevent future attacks. They paid me $50,000 for the work, more money than I'd made in the previous 6 months combined. Word spread quickly in the business community. Within a year, I had more clients than I could handle. I hired my first employee, then my second, then moved to a larger office. By my 5th year in business, I had a team of 8 specialists and was grossing over $500,000 annually. But my parents still didn't understand what I did for a living. When people asked about their children at social gatherings, they'd light up talking about Emma's latest promotion or business trip, then mention almost as an afterthought that I did computer work. They never asked about my clients, my innovations, or my plans for growth. To them, success looked like a corner office in a corporate building, not a thriving technology consultancy. Family dinners became exercises in enduring passive-aggressive comments. "Emma just got another promotion," my mother would announce. "She's really making something of herself." Then she'd turn to me with forced brightness. "And how's your little hobby business going, Jake?" It wasn't a hobby. It was my career, my passion, my livelihood. But to them, if it wasn't a corporate job with a fancy title, it didn't count. Emma, for her part, seemed to enjoy her role as the family favorite. She'd come home from her high-powered marketing job in the city, wearing expensive clothes and talking about her latest business trips. She never missed an opportunity to subtly put me down, always framed as concern or helpful advice. "You know, Jake," she'd say during family gatherings, "my company is always looking for IT support staff. I could put in a good word for you. It might be time to think about getting a real job with benefits and a steady paycheck." I tried to explain that my business was doing well, that I was building something I was proud of, but they'd just exchange those looks. The ones that said, "Poor Jake, he just doesn't get it." The worst part was holidays and special occasions. Emma's achievements were always front and center, celebrated with elaborate parties and expensive gifts. When she got engaged to her lawyer boyfriend Brad, they threw her an engagement party that cost more than most people's weddings. They rented out the ballroom at the country club, hired a professional photographer, and invited over 100 people. The local newspaper even ran a story about it in their society section. When I started dating Sarah, a kindergarten teacher I'd met through a mutual friend at a technology conference where I was speaking, my parents barely acknowledged the relationship. Sarah was intelligent, kind, and genuinely interested in my work. She'd listen for hours as I explained new projects and always asked thoughtful questions. But because she wasn't a high-powered executive like Brad, my parents treated her politely, but with obvious disinterest. I'll never forget the first time I brought Sarah to a family dinner. Emma and Brad were there, fresh from a business trip to New York where Brad had closed some major corporate merger. They spent 45 minutes regaling everyone with stories about their 5-star hotel, their dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant, and their Broadway show. When my mother finally asked Sarah what she did for work, and Sarah said she taught kindergarten, I watched my mother's face carefully arrange itself into an expression of polite interest. "How wonderful," she said, in the same tone someone might use to acknowledge a child's finger painting. "Teaching is so noble." The conversation quickly turned back to Emma and Brad's glamorous life. Nobody asked Sarah about her work with special needs children, her master's degree in early childhood education, or the innovative teaching methods she'd developed that were being studied by other schools. She was just the teacher Jake was dating, nothing more. When Emma and Brad bought their first house, my parents helped with a substantial down payment and threw them a housewarming party that was featured in the local home and garden magazine. When I finally saved enough to move out of my apartment and into a small house of my own, they visited once, spent the whole time pointing out what needed to be improved, and left after an hour. I remember my mother walking through my house with this expression of mild disappointment, as if she was seeing confirmation of all her worst fears about my life choices. "It's very practical," she said, the way someone might describe a sturdy pair of work boots. Meanwhile, Emma's house was stunning, sophisticated, and exactly the kind of place a successful young couple should have. As the years went on, the gap between how they treated Emma and how they treated me only widened. She was included in every family decision, consulted on every major purchase, invited to every event. I was often an afterthought, informed about things after the fact, if at all. Last Christmas was a perfect example of this dynamic. Emma and Brad arrived with expensive gifts for everyone, fresh from their latest vacation to Italy. They'd brought back authentic Venetian glass for my mother, a handmade leather wallet from Florence for my father, and artisanal chocolates from Rome for anyone else who'd appreciate them. The gifts were thoughtful, expensive, and came with stories about the shops where they had been purchased. I brought my parents a high-end smart home security system that I'd personally configured and installed myself. It included cameras, motion sensors, and a mobile app that would let them monitor their house from anywhere. The system cost me over $2,000 in equipment and probably 40 hours of my time to set up properly. It was exactly the kind of technology that would have impressed anyone who understood what went into it. My mother's reaction was to ask if it was going to make their internet bill more expensive. My father wanted to know if he really needed all those gadgets when he had perfectly good locks on his doors. Emma, meanwhile, spent 20 minutes showing everyone photos from her Italian vacation, while they oohed and awed over every gelato shop and museum visit. The security system I'd designed and installed for them prevented a break-in 6 months later. The cameras caught 2 teenagers trying to jimmy the back door, and the motion sensors triggered alerts that sent police to the scene within minutes. Did my parents call to thank me or acknowledge how valuable the system had been? Number. But they sure called Emma when Brad got a mention in the Legal Trade magazine for his work on a high-profile case. Which brings me to my 30th birthday. I'd been looking forward to my 30th birthday for months. It felt like a milestone, a chance to reflect on what I'd accomplished and look forward to the future. Sarah and I had been together for 3 years, and she'd been dropping hints that this might be the year she'd say yes if I proposed. I'd been working extra hard, building up my business, and I was finally in a position where I felt financially stable enough to take that next step. The ring was already purchased, hidden in my home office safe. I'd spent weeks working with a custom jeweler to design something unique for Sarah, a vintage-style setting with a diamond, surrounded by small sapphires that matched her eyes. I'd been planning to propose on my birthday weekend, maybe during a romantic dinner at the restaurant where we'd had our first date. My parents had been unusually quiet about birthday plans, which I found odd. Usually, my mother would be pestering me about what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go for dinner, who I wanted to invite. This year, nothing. When I finally asked her about it 2 weeks before my birthday, she gave me a vague response about how they were still working out the details. I should have known something was up when Emma started being evasive too. Normally, she'd at least call or text to ask what I wanted for my birthday, even if it was something perfunctory. This year, radio silence. When I texted her directly to ask if she wanted to grab lunch and catch up, she claimed she was swamped with work and would have to take a rain check. The week leading up to my birthday, I noticed my family was acting strange. Emma was uncharacteristically scarce, not returning my calls or texts. My parents seemed distracted whenever I talked to them, giving short answers and changing the subject quickly. I figured maybe they were planning some kind of surprise party, which would have been nice, considering they'd never done anything like that for me before. Maybe, I thought, this was their way of finally acknowledging that I mattered as much as Emma did. I spent that week making my own backup plans, just in case. I booked a table at Sarah's favorite restaurant for Saturday night and arranged for flowers to be delivered to her classroom on Friday. If my family was planning something, great. If not, at least Sarah and I would have a wonderful celebration together. My birthday fell on a Saturday. I woke up that morning feeling optimistic, despite not having heard from my family. Sarah had made me breakfast and given me a beautiful watch she'd been saving up for. We had plans to go out to dinner that evening, just the two of us, which I was looking forward to. Around noon, I decided to check Facebook while Sarah was getting ready for our day out. I rarely use social media much, but birthdays always brought out the well-wishers, and I figured I'd see what people had posted. That's when I saw it. The post was from my mother. A wonderful day for a wonderful family. The photo showed my parents, Emma and Brad, standing on what was obviously a tropical beach, drinks in hand, huge smiles on their faces. They were clearly in paradise. Crystal blue water, white sand, palm trees swaying in the background. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My family was on vacation, together, on my birthday, without me. I scrolled through the comments, my stomach sinking with each passing second. Friends and relatives were commenting about how beautiful Tahiti looked, how relaxing the trip must be, how lucky they were to be able to take such an amazing family vacation. Family vacation. On my 30th birthday. My hands were shaking as I typed a simple comment. Why? I didn't have to wait long for a response. My father replied within minutes. We didn't want to waste our time on a clown. I read those words over and over again. We didn't want to waste our time on a clown. On my birthday. While they were living it up in Tahiti without me. Sarah found me sitting there, staring at my phone. Jake? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I showed her the post and my father's comment. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God, Jake! I can't believe they would do this to you. On your birthday. That's when something inside me snapped. Not into anger, exactly, but into a cold, clear determination. I looked at Sarah, managed a smile, and typed back, Surprise waiting for you. What kind of surprise? Sarah asked, reading over my shoulder. The kind they deserve, I said, closing my laptop. But first, let's go celebrate my birthday properly. Just us. We went ahead with our planned day out. We went to lunch at my favorite restaurant, spent the afternoon at the local art museum, and had a wonderful dinner at the new steakhouse downtown. Sarah kept asking what I was planning, but I told her I needed to think it through first. The truth was, I'd already decided what I was going to do. It was just a matter of how to execute it. You see, what my family didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask about or show interest in, was that my little hobby business had grown into something much bigger than they imagined. Over the past 5 years, I'd built a company that specialized in high-end tech solutions for businesses. We did everything from custom software development to cybersecurity consulting to data recovery services. My biggest client was a company called Henderson and Associates, a large firm that handled legal and financial services for dozens of businesses throughout the region. I'd started working with them 3 years ago when their entire computer system crashed, and they needed someone who could not only recover their data, but also rebuild their entire network infrastructure. It had been a massive project, and I'd pulled it off flawlessly. Since then, they'd hired me for increasingly complex projects, and I'd become their go-to tech consultant for anything computer-related. The relationship had been incredibly lucrative. Henderson and Associates accounted for about 60% of my business revenue. But here's the thing my family didn't know. Emma worked for Henderson and Associates. She was their director of marketing, the job she was so proud of, the one that allowed her to afford her fancy clothes and expensive lifestyle. And here's the other thing they didn't know. The contract I had with Henderson and Associates was up for renewal at the end of the month, a contract worth roughly $300,000 annually. Monday morning, I called Rick Henderson, the company's managing partner, and requested a meeting. Rick and I had developed a good working relationship over the years, and he was always happy to hear from me. Jake, he said when I walked into his office, good to see you. I was actually hoping we could sit down this week to discuss the contract renewal. I've got some exciting new projects in mind for you. Actually, Rick, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I've made a decision about the contract. Rick leaned forward, looking interested. Oh? What's on your mind? I'm not going to be renewing, I said simply. The smile faded from Rick's face. What? Jake, I don't understand. Is this about money? Because I was prepared to offer you a significant increase. It's not about money, I interrupted. It's about focusing my business in a different direction. I've decided to specialize more in startup companies and smaller businesses. I think that's where my passion really lies. Rick looked stunned. Jake, I have to say this is a huge shock. You've been instrumental in our operations. Is there anything I can do to change your mind? The increase I was thinking about was substantial. Maybe 40% more than your current contract. I shook my head. I appreciate the offer, Rick, but my mind is made up. I'll honor my current contract through the end of the month, of course, and I'll do everything I can to make the transition smooth for you. This is going to be very difficult to replace, Rick said, running his hand through his hair. Your knowledge of our systems, your response time, the quality of your work, we've come to rely on you completely. I understand, and I'm sorry for any inconvenience. I can recommend a few other firms that might be able to help you. Rick sighed heavily. I'm going to have to let the team know about this. Emma Martinez, in particular, is going to be very concerned. Several of her major marketing campaigns depend on the custom software solutions you've developed for us. I'm sure Emma will figure something out, I said, keeping my voice neutral. She's very resourceful. After the meeting, I spent the rest of the day documenting everything about Henderson and Associates' systems, preparing detailed transition notes, and making sure I left them in the best possible position. Despite what they'd done to me, I wasn't interested in sabotaging them or leaving them high and dry. I was a professional, and I intended to act like one, but I also knew that losing me was going to create significant problems for them. The custom software I developed for their marketing department was integral to their operations. The security protocols I'd implemented were complex and required ongoing maintenance. The network infrastructure I designed was sophisticated and needed someone with extensive knowledge to manage it properly. Most importantly, I was the only one who fully understood how all these systems work together. Training a replacement would take months, assuming they could even find someone with the right skill set. That evening, I told Sarah what I'd done. "Oh my God," she said, her eyes wide. "Emma's going to freak out." "Eventually," I said. "But remember, she doesn't know that I know about Tahiti yet. As far as the family is concerned, their trip is still a secret. When do you think they'll realize what's happening?" "Well, they're not due back until Thursday. Rick will probably break the news to the company sometime this week. I imagine Emma will find out Wednesday or Thursday." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Jake, are you sure about this? I mean, I'm furious at your family for what they did, but this could really hurt Emma's career." I thought about that. "You know what, Sarah? You're right. This could really hurt Emma's career. Just like their favoritism hurt mine for years. Just like being excluded from family events hurt me. Just like being called a clown on my 30th birthday hurt me. But two wrongs don't make a right," Sarah said gently. "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "But this isn't about revenge. This is about me making a business decision that's best for my company. I can't help it if that decision happens to have consequences for Emma." The next few days passed quietly. I went about my normal routine, working on projects for other clients, planning the future direction of my business. I'd already been in touch with several smaller companies that were interested in my services, and I was excited about the possibilities. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Emma. "Jake," she said, and I could hear the panic in her voice. "I need to talk to you. It's important." "What's up?" I asked casually. "I just found out that you're not renewing your contract with Henderson and Associates." "Is that true?" "Yes, that's true." "Jake, you can't do this. Do you have any idea how much my department depends on the work you do for us?" "I imagine it's significant," I said, "but I've made my decision. This is going to be a disaster. The marketing campaigns I have running are all built on the platforms you developed. If we lose you, I'm going to have to rebuild everything from scratch. It could take months, maybe years. I'm sure you'll figure something out. You're very resourceful." There was a long pause. "Jake, I don't understand why you're doing this. Is this about money? Because I'm sure Rick would be willing to negotiate." "It's not about money, Emma. It's about me deciding what's best for my business. This doesn't make sense. You've been working with us for 3 years. Why would you suddenly decide to leave?" "Sometimes people reevaluate their priorities," I said. "Speaking of which, how was your vacation?" Another long pause. "What vacation?" "Oh, come on, Emma. I saw the Facebook posts. Tahiti looked beautiful." I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "Jake, I can explain." "No need to explain anything. I hope you all had a wonderful time. I certainly had an interesting birthday." "Jake, please." "I have to go, Emma. I have a client call. But congratulations on the promotion, by the way. Director of Marketing is quite an achievement." I hung up before she could respond. Thursday evening, my phone started ringing nonstop. First Emma, then my mother, then my father. I let them all go to voicemail. Friday morning, I decided to listen to the messages. Emma's message was desperate. "Jake, please call me back. We need to talk about this contract situation. I know you're upset about the Tahiti thing, but this is bigger than that. My job could be in jeopardy if we can't work something out." My mother's message was confused. "Jake, honey, Emma says there's some kind of problem with your computer work. She's very upset. Please call me back so we can figure this out." My father's message was angry. Jake, whatever game you're playing, you need to stop it right now. Emma's career is on the line here. You're being selfish and vindictive. Call me back immediately. I deleted all the messages without responding. Saturday morning, I was working in my home office when Sarah announced that I had visitors. Your whole family is here, she said, looking worried. They look pretty upset. I walked to the front door and opened it to find my parents, Emma and Brad, standing on my porch. Emma's eyes were red and puffy like she'd been crying. My mother looked anxious. My father looked furious. Jake, my father said immediately, we need to talk. Do we? I asked. Because I seem to remember you telling me that you didn't want to waste your time on a clown. Emma stepped forward. Jake, I know you're angry about Tahiti, and you have every right to be. We handled that badly, but you can't let that affect innocent people at my company. Innocent people? My team, my colleagues, the clients who depend on the work we do. If Henderson and Associates loses you, it's going to hurt a lot of people who had nothing to do with our family issues. I considered this. You know what, Emma? You make a valid point. There are innocent people who might be affected by my decision, just like there were innocent people affected when you decided to take a family vacation without me on my 30th birthday. That's different, my mother interjected. That was a family matter. This is about people's livelihoods. Really? Because my livelihood has been affected by family matters for years. Every time you dismissed my business as a hobby, every time you suggested I get a real job, every time you made it clear that my achievements didn't matter, that affected my livelihood too. My father stepped forward. Jake, stop being dramatic. This is about Emma's career. You're right, I said. It is about Emma's career. The career that's been more important to this family than anything I've ever accomplished. The career that got her invited to Tahiti while I got called a clown. Brad spoke up for the first time. Look, Jake, I get that you're hurt, but don't you think you're overreacting a little bit? It was just a vacation. I stared at him. Just a vacation? On my 30th birthday? After a lifetime of being treated like a second-class family member? Emma started crying again. Jake, please. I'm sorry about Tahiti. We're all sorry. It was a mistake, but you're going to ruin my career over this. I'm not ruining anything, I said calmly. I'm making a business decision. I decided not to renew a contract. That's well within my rights as a business owner. But you're only doing it to hurt me, Emma sobbed. Actually, Emma, I'm doing it because I realized something last weekend. I realized that I've been enabling this family's treatment of me for years. I've been so grateful for any scraps of attention or approval that I never stood up for myself. I never demanded the respect I deserved. My mother was starting to cry now, too. Jake, we love you. We've always loved you. Do you? I asked. Because love doesn't exclude someone from family vacations. Love doesn't call someone a clown on their birthday. Love doesn't dismiss someone's career as a hobby for years on end. We made mistakes, my father said, his voice softer now. We know that, but this isn't the way to handle it. What would be the right way to handle it? I asked. Should I have just sucked it up and pretended everything was fine? Should I have spent another 30 years being the family disappointment? Emma stepped forward again. Jake, what do you want? Tell me what you want, and I'll make it happen. I thought about that for a moment. What I want is for this family to treat me with the same respect you've always shown Emma. What I want is for my parents to acknowledge that my business is just as legitimate and important as Emma's corporate job. What I want is for all of you to understand that what you did in Tahiti wasn't just about a vacation. It was about 30 years of making me feel like I don't matter. We understand that now, my mother said quickly. We see how much we hurt you. Do you? Because 3 hours ago, Dad was leaving me angry voicemails about how I was being selfish and vindictive. That doesn't sound like understanding to me. My father looked ashamed. I was angry. I said things I shouldn't have said. Just like you said I was a clown. I was angry then too. I didn't mean it. But you said it. On my birthday. In front of everyone. There was a long silence. Finally, Emma spoke up. Jake, what can we do to fix this? Tell me what it would take for you to reconsider the contract decision. I looked at each of them. These people who were supposed to be my family, but had treated me like an outsider for most of my life. Here's what I want, I said finally. I want Dad to post a public apology on Facebook, acknowledging that what he said about me was wrong and hurtful. I want all of you to acknowledge publicly that my business is successful and that you're proud of what I've accomplished. And I want a sincere, genuine apology from each of you, not because you want me to change my mind about the contract, but because you actually understand how much you've hurt me. Emma nodded eagerly. Yes, absolutely. We can do all of that. And, I continued, I want you to understand that even if you do all of those things, I might still decide not to renew the contract, Because this decision isn't just about punishing you, it's about what's best for my business. The hope faded from Emma's face. But Jake, let me finish. Over the past few years, I've realized that having Henderson and Associates as such a large client has actually been limiting my growth. I've been so focused on your needs that I haven't been able to pursue other opportunities. Ending this contract will allow me to diversify my client base and take on more challenging projects. So this really isn't just about revenge? My mother asked. No, it's not. Although I won't lie and say that the timing isn't related to what happened in Tahiti, Brad spoke up again. Is there any chance you might consider staying on as a consultant? Maybe helping train your replacement? I considered this. That's a possibility. I'd be willing to discuss it with Rick. Emma looked like she was about to collapse with relief. Really? I said I'd be willing to discuss it. I'm not making any promises. Over the next hour, we had the most honest conversation our family had ever had. My parents admitted that they had favored Emma for years, and that they'd never fully appreciated what I was trying to build with my business. Emma acknowledged that she'd taken advantage of her favored position, and had often been dismissive of my accomplishments. My father posted the public apology that evening, and the response from family and friends was overwhelmingly supportive of me. Many people commented that they'd always been impressed by my business, and couldn't understand why my family didn't seem to appreciate it. The following Monday, I met with Rick Henderson again. I agreed to stay on as a consultant for 6 months to help train my replacement and ensure a smooth transition. The consulting fee was actually higher than my previous contract, and the reduced workload allowed me to take on several new clients. The transition period was fascinating from a business perspective. Watching Henderson and Associates scramble to replace me gave me a new appreciation for how integral my services had become to their operations. They went through 3 different IT companies in the first month, none of which could understand the custom systems I'd built for them. Emma was working 60-hour weeks trying to manually recreate reports that my automated systems had been generating instantly. I heard through the grapevine that she'd had to postpone 2 major marketing campaigns because the client management database I'd designed was too complex for their new IT support to modify. Rick called me twice during the first month to ask if I'd reconsider ending our relationship entirely. The second time, he offered me a contract worth nearly double my previous rate if I'd come back full-time. I politely declined, but I did extend my consulting agreement to help train their new senior systems administrator. Emma's job was saved, though she had to work much harder to rebuild some of the systems that had depended on my custom solutions. The experience seemed to give her a new appreciation for the complexity of what I did and the skill it required. For the first time in our adult lives, she started asking me genuine questions about my work instead of offering unsolicited advice about getting a real job. As for my family, things didn't magically become perfect overnight. 30 years of dysfunction doesn't disappear with one conversation, but it was a start. We began having regular family dinners again, and for the first time, my parents seemed genuinely interested in my business and my plans for the future. The first few dinners were awkward, filled with forced conversations and careful politeness. My parents were clearly trying to show interest in my work, but they didn't really understand what questions to ask. Emma made an effort to include me in conversations instead of dominating them with stories about her corporate achievements. Slowly, though, things began to feel more natural. My father started asking thoughtful questions about cybersecurity and how businesses protect themselves from hackers. My mother began introducing me to her friends as my son, the successful business owner, instead of my son who does computer work. The real test came 6 months later when I told them Sarah and I were engaged. This time, instead of a perfunctory congratulations followed by a change of subject, they insisted on throwing us an engagement party. They rented the same country club ballroom they'd used for Emma's party, hired the same photographer, and invited just as many people. Sarah was overwhelmed by their effort to include her and celebrate our relationship. During the party, my mother pulled me aside and apologized again for how they'd treated Sarah when we first started dating. I was so focused on what I thought success should look like, she said, that I couldn't see how wonderful she is and how happy she makes you. The engagement party felt like a turning point. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like my achievements and my relationships mattered to my family as much as Emma's did. The real change, though, was in how I saw myself. For years, I'd defined my worth based on my family's approval. When they dismissed my business as a hobby, part of me believed them. When they excluded me from family events, part of me thought maybe I deserved it. But standing up to them, making them face the consequences of their actions, and demanding the respect I deserved, that changed everything. I stopped seeking their approval and started trusting my own judgment about what was important and valuable. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.